Greetings everyone, this is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I prepared an unusual list for all of you with 5 Comedic Marvel Omnibus editions. While humor might not be your number one draw for comic book reads, I know for me, whenever I find a series that has a really great brand of humor, I definitely enjoy it, and I think it's worth recognizing. I'm so excited to do this list today, but before we dive in, I do want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check them out. You can find the link to their website in the description for this video, and if you find something you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to receive $2 off of your order today. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. First up, and in no particular order, the Gwenpool Omnibus from Marvel. This is a book I actually just reviewed on the channel not too long ago. You may or may not have seen it. This is a character that fascinated me since basically the moment I first heard about her. I had no idea who this person was. Is it supposed to be some kind of Gwen Stacy? Is it somehow related to Deadpool? And to find that the answer is really neither was really surprising to me when I first picked up this book. I was introduced to this character I guess more culturally than anything else. I saw pictures of her on covers, things like that, but then I really had my first meeting with this character when I read Chip Zdarsky's Howard the Duck. Eventually I did go ahead and get a copy of this omnibus, and I had a blast reading it. There were a lot of really genuinely funny moments, just getting into the quirkiness of this character. I think for me, if you don't know anything about Gwenpool, essentially she's from, air quotes, our world, the real world where Marvel comic characters are just that. They're comic book characters. But she finds her way into the 616 mainstream Marvel universe, and now she has all of this knowledge about all this Marvel comics history. It gives her definitely a unique take on the events that transpire within these issues, and it gives her a unique sense of fourth wall breaking ability. They do also develop a power for her at some point in this omnibus, but it really is a lot of fun. I think that there's a lot of really good tongue-in-cheek humor here, but this character is surprisingly layered. There's some depth to this character that I think can be missed if you just get the broad strokes bullet points of who this character is. I think that this is really a rich book with some gorgeous artwork all the way throughout, and I think it's genuinely funny. I like the kind of eclectic cast of characters that these creators put in Gwenpool. It's a surprisingly well-rounded read. I don't know that it's uproariously funny, like I'm not laughing out loud, cackling all the time, but I definitely find it more humorous than annoying, and I think it added a lot of levity to my comic book reading. If you're looking for a pretty fun omnibus with a lot of charm, I highly recommend the Gwenpool Omnibus. Next up on our Comedic Omnibus list, the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl Omnibus from Marvel Comics. This is a book that I will admit I'm still making my way through. It's a gigantic tome of a book, but so far it's been a lot of fun. I don't know that I'm necessarily the target demographic for this book. I'm sure it does appeal to younger audiences, particularly female audiences, but I know that just about anyone could really enjoy this if you have the right attitude about this book. I've really enjoyed my read through it so far. I think that there's a lot of just, again, levity to this book, similar to what we saw in Gwenpool. I would say that the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl is actually even more fun, if I were to put a word to it. It doesn't take itself seriously at all. There's a lot of in-joke, kind of in-comic book humor, inside jokes within the issues themselves. The main character, Squirrel Girl, is so quirky and likable, it's kind of hard to describe without just diving in for yourself. I think the artwork is really cartoony and fun, and it's really a different perspective on the Marvel Universe that I guarantee most readers have never experienced. Her interaction with Galactus in the first handful of issues, for example, is one I will never forget. The kind of idea that she's unbeatable is really interesting. It's definitely not a misnomer, but you think unbeatable, you think that she wins every single fight she gets in, but it's really more of no one really beats her. She's so likable, she's always able to kind of diffuse and make her way through these really harrowing situations with a lot of notable villains. At any rate, her approach to crime fighting is definitely unique and not like anything I've ever seen. This book also has some unique kind of editorial little blurbs or jokes at the bottom of almost every page from the author, presumably, or the narrator. This, amongst other things, make Unbeatable Squirrel Girl a truly unique reading experience. I see a lot of the humor myself, not only in the quirkiness and kind of jokes of the titular character, but really how this book kind of pokes fun at the Marvel Universe as a whole. You really get to see different sides of these characters, and that's really done because of how Squirrel Girl interacts with the rest of these casts of characters and the world at large. But I think if you're a fan of the Marvel Universe, there's so much to really just laugh at here. To have a really good time, to enjoy some good sense of conflict, but it's really secondary to just the fun of this book. Highly recommend it so far. I had to put this on my list. Of course, Howard the Duck by Chip Zdarsky and Joe Quinones over at Marvel Comics. This book was absolutely a gateway book for me. This is how I first encountered not only Gwenpool, but actually the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, the previous two entries in this video. I first got to see them in the pages of this omnibus, so this was not only a funny, fun omnibus for me, it was also a gateway book, as I just said. But this book is surprisingly amazing. I know Chip Zdarsky has become a mainstream comic book hero in many regards. I love this writer. I love what he's done with Daredevil and Batman so far. I enjoy what he did with Marvel 2-in-1, Fantastic Four title, and so many other books out there. But when I found his name attached to this book with Joe Quinones, which is an artist I never really had read before, at least to my knowledge, this book really just jumped out at me. I could not put this thing down. It was such a page turner, and I thoroughly enjoyed my experience. This book was perfect for new readers. I had no previous knowledge of Howard the Duck required to enjoy this ride. I think it's also a really good one and done kind of omnibus that you can read this run, feel like you got a good taste, a good story arc, beginning, middle, and end, and you can bow out gracefully without needing to read a ton of more other books. But there's so much fun and humor in here. This is actually an omnibus that I believe, laugh out loud at a couple points. I think that the writing was so sharp and humorous that I found myself just honestly smiling a lot reading this book. To me on this list, this is probably the funniest book I could recommend for a Marvel omnibus that I've had the opportunity to read at the very least. A really, really amazing book. I did review this once upon a time as well if you're interested in more details. And hey, if you're enjoying this video and you like comic book list videos in general, or comic book reviews, unboxings, shorts, fun community polls, and questions, and you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I highly recommend you do so. We'd love to have you as a watcher, so definitely consider it. Thank you so much. And now we can keep going with today's list. Next up, we have Deadpool and Cable Omnibus, which of course collects the Cable and Deadpool run from some time ago. This book to me was definitely very, very funny. I think Deadpool can be a character that some people adore and some people are so burnt out on that it's just becoming a bit obnoxious. For me, I've always been a Deadpool fan, and while there are maybe funnier runs out there, the Daniel Way run on Deadpool comes to mind, I did want to recommend this Deadpool and Cable Omnibus. For one, it got a recent reprint, and for two, this book is not only comedic, it also has a lot of action and great narratives. I really like the kind of global mercenary or mission-based story arcs. I think the pairing of these two oddball characters in Cable and Deadpool just really made for a surprisingly fun and fresh dynamic. I think we got to see what not only made Deadpool funny, but also Cable and the way that this kind of odd couple interacted with each other. The way they're sort of inextricably linked for most of this run. Well, frankly, there's humor in that alone, and certainly the way they unpack that throughout this journey, it's definitely one to remember. This is another example of a funny book that also has a lot of heart to it. There's a lot of poignant moments for both of these characters that I will always remember quite fondly. I think that this book is a good Deadpool gateway book. Same with Cable. I think that this is a different version of Cable than I've ever read before, but it's one of my favorites. And this book, like I said, it's a great run. I think it's a good entry point for new readers, and it has a fantastic beginning, middle, and end. There's a lot of really good laugh out loud humor in it, but like I said, it's balanced really well with a sense of action, conflict, pacing, momentum that I think is all handled beautifully. It's a really sizable book, but I think it's one that a lot of people overlook. I think it's some of the best Deadpool writing I've had the pleasure of reading, and I think it's definitely one for those out there who are looking for something funny but need to have more substance. This is definitely a book I could confidently recommend. Last on our list today, but certainly not least, X Factor by Peter David Omnibus Volume 1. This Marvel Omnibus was such a surprise for me. I had an opportunity to review this not too long ago as well. I love this book. This is the entire 90s run from Peter David for X Factor. He did come back in the early 2000s during the X Factor Investigations era. You might see a Volume 2 and Volume 3 Omnibus solicited for X Factor, but this is the 90s stuff. And no, you do not really need this to enjoy that kind of latter run during the early 2000s, but I do think it's still a great thing to pick up and read. It does feel pretty self-contained for the most part. I was able to dive into this without being too lost, but why I included this on the list, and this might surprise many people, but frankly, I thought that this run was hysterical. This was the run that really made me fall in love with Peter David. He has written so many incredible comic book runs in his time, but this is really my first exposure where I loved just almost about everything he did. I loved what he did with the team, the characters, and definitely the humor. The humor is interlaced through all of this book, and I could not stop laughing at several points. This book was so good, it actually had me reevaluate my stance on 90s comic books in general. Before reading this X Factor run, I was really not a fan of 90s comics as kind of a general broad overstatement, but I loved this so much I had to reevaluate my stance, and since then I found a lot of other great 90s comics out there, but this one shines really bright amongst them. I consider it kind of a hidden gem book. I don't hear enough people talking about it, and I think that there are a lot more other things going on, kind of like the Deadpool and Cable Omnibus. This does have a lot of action and great kind of X-Men based storylines going on throughout the entire book, but comedy is interlaced throughout all of it. And I think because it's trying to be a superhero, action, X-Men-y kind of book first, the humor feels that much more organic. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be funny. It doesn't seem like it's trying to be a comedy book. It just happens to be really funny, engaging, disarming in many ways. I think Peter David just shines here in a way that just, again, it's so compelling. I couldn't stop reading this book. And I think because I was a little bit prejudiced against this whole decade of comic books, well, frankly, that should show you how great I think this book actually is. It had me completely reevaluate my whole stance on all of this, and it was funny to boot. All the way throughout it, I was laughing. I think that this is a great book. I think easily my favorite funny X book, and something I would definitely recommend to any Marvel fan out there. And that's really going to wrap it for today for 5 great comedic Marvel Omnibus editions. I really enjoyed reading all of these books. I am still going through Squirrel Girl, as I mentioned earlier, but so far I have just really enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed the rest of these titles as well. A lot of these books I have reviewed on the channel before, but getting to revisit them for a list video like this, well, frankly, it put the biggest smile on my face. I enjoyed all of these. I'd love to hear in the comments what comic book runs you find extremely humorous or comedic. They don't have to be omnibus, they don't have to be Marvel Comics, but let me know what you find to be really funny comic books in the comments. Or let me know if you like comedy and comics at all. Maybe it's not your thing. If so, thank you for sticking around and watching this video. And for the rest of you as well, a big thank you. It means the world to me that you guys are all sticking around. Thank you for watching, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, and maybe check out one of my others on your way out. Thanks, and have a good one.